What's going on, everybody? This is Jeff Hillen with Selling Stories, where we discuss the struggles, successes, and life lessons learned through sales and in sales. I've got Carlos Garcia, founder of Exceed Sales, where he helps accounting professionals leverage technology to get more of the clients they want. What's going on, Carlos?
Hey man, so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Very, very good, man. Hey, I want to tell everybody, how do I meet Carlos? Well, you're very active on social media, and I started following some of the posts you have, and some specific topics jumped off the page right off the get go, just exceed sales in general, because I'm thinking to myself, everyone wants to exceed sales. So that tagline, I want to learn more about it. I want to have you tell us about powerless language, reframing sales conversations, and handling emotional hijackers. I'm hoping that sounds familiar because I saw it from your stuff. Does that sound familiar?
Oh yeah, no, you did your homework, and these are just some realities that we don't think about. That sometimes we know they exist, but they don't really have like a label to it. So sometimes putting a label to it allow us to create consciousness and then know how to navigate when these situations happen to us, so that we can level up our sales skills. So I love talking about these things.
That's awesome. Well, if you can, just give us a kind of a brief synopsis of your background, how you got into
Sure.
sales, and the exceed sales aspect of your business.
Yeah, so I won't go into it in too much detail, Jeff, but I'll tell you that I first started selling when I was probably in middle school. I really loved candy, specifically the pixie sticks. They're little
Oh yeah,
sticks that you like. It was like crack for me when
sugar.
I was a kid.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I started thinking, and I brought them to school, and kids were like, always like, hey, man, where'd you get that? This, time, the other. And like all of a sudden, I'm like, you know what? I have some extras. I'm not going to have them. I'm going to start selling them. So I would first I was a little hustler in my school, but I was just always looking to. I love money. I just loved money, and I remember just like the first time I wanted something, like I wanted a pair of skates. I wanted like a Nintendo. Like my parents just taught me really early on. It's like, well, if you want that, you got to earn it. I was like, all right, well, how do I earn it? They're like, well, you got to work for it. Like, how do I work for it? And so
yeah.
I started finding some creative ways to do that. So I started washing cars. I started selling candy in school. So like very early on, I just loved making money because I loved things. I loved
Okay.
technology. I remember Laser Pointer and Radio Shack was like $70. They were little portable TVs. Like they were like super expensive. I loved the gadgets because my dad was always into technology, and but he wasn't gonna buy me and spoil me with things. He taught me the lesson of like you got to work for what you want to get. So very early on, I was exposed to selling. I pressure washed. I remember I pressure washed like 10 houses one weekend, $20 per driveway, and I bought a scooter, like a motor scooter, that weekend. So like I just loved
So it
making
was coming
money.
in and it was going out. Like,
Oh yeah, no.
yeah.
I definitely didn't know like how to balance budgets or save. Saving was not even a concept for me, which is kind of interesting because later on in my career, I ended up becoming a banker, which taught me, the importance of building credit and saving and retirement planning and all these things that I later on applied for my own life. But just fast forward, my first real sales gig was actually working for a retail store, which was Best Buy, and in
Hmm.
there I learned some very important skills, to have really good conversations with customers by asking questions, building rapport, just making sure and we had goals. We had sales goals to present, warranties and accessories and cross-selling and upselling, the credit card and this and that and the other. And so they taught me a lot, just how to do things in an ethical fashion. The one thing I really loved about building my skill sets there is because they were a non-commission space, so there wasn't that pressure or feeling or needing to be hungry. So when then I later on moved into places where I was incentivized with a commission, I kind of kept that same ethical approach. And so I ended up moving into the bank. And then the majority of my career, really, I grew up, and my adult, career was mostly in banking. So I was a banker. I was a business commercial lender, business development officer. So I had to go out and hunt for new business. I was a district manager, and then my final position was a small business coach, where I really became an expert at teaching small businesses and small business bankers how to develop deposit relationships, lending relationships, but also teaching small businesses how to build credit, how to grow their business, how to leverage capital, how to use technology to drive business. And my brother and I always kind of went on a similar path in our careers. but then he decided to kind of go into the accounting industry. So he
Okay.
grew his brand and his name in doing that. And he's got a huge following in YouTube. He's got like 250,000 followers, and he became
Wow.
kind of an authority in that space. And so he's been convincing me forever, dude, come be an entrepreneur, go on your own. Finally, I kind of gave in and I said, you know what, I'm just going to do my own thing. And, every time I would go to him, I'd be like, all right, man, I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to leave the bank and do my thing. He's like, all right, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, all right, well, come up with a business name. And then so I sat down one day in my couch and I opened up my Apple Notes and I just kind of asked myself one question, which was, what are my skills? And so then I started writing down everything. And I think I wrote down anywhere between to like 25 to like 40 things. Most of it was revolving around sales and around technology. And so I was like,
Excellent.
oh, I love selling. I love training people how to sell. I love technology. I love CRMs. I know finance. I know banking. I know lending. I know credit. I know retirement. I know this. And I was like, drive sales, improve sales, and exceed sales. And so that's
Yeah.
how I came up with that thought process. And I think the two words together kind of,
Did you did you ever
explain
have like that
themselves.
moment where you're like exceed sales and you went to check it? Was it available when you went to buy it, or did you have to like negotiate with
Yeah,
somebody like I just had this best moment ever? Don't stop my
yeah.
momentum.
I went online. I don't own the website. Somebody else does, but
Okay.
my website is actually exceedSalesTraining.com. But I have all of the social handles,
There you
and
go.
eventually I'll own that website. It's meant to be. It's in my destiny. But that didn't stop me, right? And some
Yeah.
people, sometimes when you become a perfectionist and everything has to exactly work the way it does, like, one of the things for me, it's like if I'm in love with it, like I'm just gonna go all in. And so I did. And then I decided, all right, well, I'm going to teach B2B sales and banking, which is what I know. But then little by little, my first client was actually, fortunate for me, my brother and two other partners own a firm, and it was all broken, their process, their technology, their everything. And they were like, listen, we'll bring you in, obviously at a fraction of what you earn at the bank, if you could fix our firm. And so I had to learn their technology and their process, and very quickly, with like 9 months to a year, we were able to like really do a nice job there. And I was like, hey, I could do this for like all accountants. And so I
Now I got to ask
decided
you real
to
quick. Did they push
push that.
back on some of the things there that you gave advice on, because you have that personal connection and then business partners? Were you like, "Hey, this is what you need to do," and they're like, "I don't know," or were they pretty open to what you were suggesting?
I would say the majority was very, very open. There's like always, you're gonna meet with resistance, but I gotta tell you, I'm very fortunate for the skills that I have gotten from my 15-year career in the bank, and before that, because it really has allowed me to be able to navigate through most in any situation. I mean, there's no such situation that can really phase me. Like I can be in a room full of people and met with a ton of resistance, and I can manage that conversation in such a way to help, kind of influence or really, arrive at the destination that we need, for what that team or that business needs. So I'll tell you, there were some challenges, but it was really, really smooth. We retained all the employees. Our engagement went up tremendously. We hired new employees. Our sales went up. Our customers were happier. The workflow improved. The partners are happier. They're less stressed.
Yeah.
Did we have some challenges? Yeah, but like that's my learning curve, and they also knew kind of what they were getting into. But it was a level up because I brought a corporate experience into a small business. So imagine a small business being leveled up into more of that corporate approach. So there were a lot of elements that helped them really look even better.
Did
So
you feel as if because you had that client and you were able to, I guess, really, prove what you already knew, you knew that you had the ability to make something like this happen, that you were then able to give yourself even more confidence to go out to new clients, new prospects to demonstrate, here's a perfect example of me doing this with your own brand and by yourself?
yeah, I got to tell you, maybe my experience is a little bit unique in the sense that a couple things. I'm an extrovert by nature because of two reasons. One, uh, my dad has been an incredible force of influence and inspiration to me and my brother. And when we were kids, he would talk to any stranger in the street. It didn't matter. It's just a friendly, inquisitive guy, loves asking questions and meeting people. when we were kids, we didn't care for it much. If anything,
Hmm.
we hated it because we just kind of wanted it to go, and we just saw adults talking boring. Like two people like, Dad, let's go. But by me observing that behavior, it made it really easy for me to always be curious and always ask questions and always be sociable and be open. And so where some people are not exposed to that, sometimes if you're an introvert or you didn't kind of see a role model that like demonstrated sort of that fearlessness and the willingness to be social and friendly, which in a sales job you need to be, there it could be a lot harder for you to overcome that. The second thing I think that helps me be a little bit more fearless and have more courage, practice more courage, is I love challenging myself into self-development, and I did improv school for a year and improvisational comedy. And I love comedy. Always been a huge fan of comedy, but actually doing it in front of people and just improvising, which is you're making up a story as you go with a person in front of you, can be really, really scary, and like the adrenaline rush. And so those things have really, I've kind of been battle tested to be
Yeah.
faced with so many things that for me, fortunately, I've been able to build enough tough skin to I actually thrive in things that are like unexpected, unknown, and weird. And with that, it kind of makes me even more valuable
So I'm going to ask
because
you
of it.
because you brought it up and you said you're open to it. So best or worst improv story that you remember when you went through it? What's the most, what
I
most
think my
memorable?
my most memorable was, in what's funny about improv is that the idea of improv is if you try to be funny, you won't be funny. Like when you're trying to do a scene and you're trying to force something funny, and in my head I'm like already like always thinking about what I'm going to say when after the person
It's
stops
like
talking.
tactical funniness, right? You're like,
Yeah, and
this is
like
going to be great.
I hear crickets. And my favorite part, that was the funny to everybody, because it was a moment of humility, of like self-reflection, of letting go, and just having a moment of that, like I didn't know what the hell to say, and I unconsciously said something, and everybody just burst into laughter. Was We were doing a scene, and there was my scene partner had told me their name at the beginning of the scene, and later on in the scene, like I'm acting like I'm really mad at this person, and I say, you know what, not even gonna say your name, and I just said something like that, because I really didn't know their name, so I justified it by saying this person that's sitting next to me, which I won't even say their name, and like I said it like as a way to like justify not saying their name, and
Yeah.
just everyone bursted laughter because it's like
Yeah.
I got
We
caught in
know.
like
Yeah.
forgetting their name, and I thought that was most memorable. It just taught me that it's okay, like it's okay to like get it wrong.
Sure.
You're not gonna die, which is like the thing I told you, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think fear is just such a powerful force that could get in the way of everyone's greatness. And so being exposed to things that help us practice fighting against fear and practicing courage every day, I think helps us uh, kind of look at new challenges and opportunities in a positive light, rather than in a fearful light. Because if we operate in a state of fear, then obviously it stops us from action. And the
Yeah.
most important thing is just do it. Nike.
Yeah. Well, if you ask my wife, she'll say she's the funny one in the relationship. I know better. I'm by far the funnier one in our relationship. Now, my kids, they'll pick her, but I think it's just because they love her more. But you mentioned about humor and improv, and I would say, you have to be yourself, and you have to be willing to have, negative feedback and be willing to accept that. So I think improv is probably the best ability to deal with. You said crickets. There's nothing scarier than something going over and not getting a reaction. And I think in sales, I think some of the things we fear is like sales purgatory, where we don't get an answer. Like we want, as salespeople DNA, we want somebody to give us a yes
Feedback.
first and foremost. If they give us a no, the really good ones, we will work through that no until we get to the end result of that yes. So when we send emails and we don't hear back, and we leave a voicemail and somebody doesn't call us back, that cricket part is very scary in sales. So to your improv, being able to work through that and find a way to make those crickets go away is critical.
Great point. Yep.
I want to know powerless language. I wasn't really familiar when you brought that up on your social media. What the heck is that? And can you explain it to us, man?
Well, there's a lot of things that we know exist out there in the world, but sometimes we may not even put an actual label to it, and putting a label to it just allows us to create some consciousness. And so how that can impact a lot of this is neuro language processing, which is like how people interpret you, whether you are someone who's confident, are you someone who's nervous, are you shy, are you, are you someone that is trustworthy? Like there's all these things that subconsciously people are evaluating about you. And most of the times it's because a lot of people, when they're talking to someone else, they're looking for ways to connect with that person by looking for the similarities. Like, is this someone that is like me? And like me could be, is this someone who's gone through adversity? Like me could be, is this someone who is cool? Is this someone who's anxious? Is this someone who's looks shady? Are they trustworthy? And so when the words you say can really drive or trigger certain responses from the person that's listening. And so your language and the words that you use in a conversation can come off as either, confident, or, maybe tentative or nervous, or like you don't know what you're talking about. And so powerless language is just there are a bunch of different examples, but saying like filler language, or maybe tentative language is really bad too, like maybe, possibly, probably. So not committing to things. So if someone
Okay.
asks you a question, does this accomplish my will this accomplish my task? Can you guarantee me a result? Like a client's going to be this direct with you sometimes, and you might say, well, I'm not exactly sure, but let me check, and this and that. So like there are some ways for you could address that. You could just say, no, I'm not going to guarantee your result. Like, just be
Yeah.
confident. But what I can tell you is your probabilities of this thing happening is going to be this much, and I'm confident I can commit to that. Like the difference of saying, maybe let me check, well, not really, where I can't really guarantee anything, or say, I'm going to be honest with you. No, I can't guarantee anything. But here's what I can guarantee is blah. And so it just changes the tone of the conversation. And so becoming aware, and one of the things you folks can do to work on this is listen to yourself, record your sales conversations. It's one of the ways that I like to self-reflect on what can I work on, especially like if I do a podcast, or if I do public speaking, or if I'm speaking to a potential customer and I circle back, I'm like, oh, gosh, why didn't that, maybe was there something I could have done different or better? And I circle back and I do a little counter with my pen. And one of the things that I did with public speaking, I say, a lot, like, and I start ticking it. How many times did I say, So rather than saying, because it could be distracting,
Yeah.
just pause.
I would
Right.
tell you one thing I had no idea until this podcast happened is how many times I say right, like I'm asking the question out loud, waiting for the confirmation back. And until I heard myself many times on a podcast and walking through that, I had no idea. So to your point about recording yourself speaking and having the courage to hear it back and be willing to accept your faults and work on the things that you need to work on, absolutely 100%. It's not easy, but it's necessary to figure out where you said maybe you don't even recognize you say it until you hear yourself say it 32 times and recognize, yeah, that's not the message I want to portray. I wanted to ask you too, in your niche, you work with accountants, and I feel like I have the ability to say this only because I have a degree in accounting. Most accountants, if you want to stereotype, are more introverted than extroverted. So, do you think that the powerless language is more difficult for people that are naturally introverted to overcome based on not wanting to sound cocky or overconfident?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a really good question. The accountants that I work with are such great, like a noble profession. I honestly just I respect so much of how good-hearted they are, because they truly chose this profession to make the world a better place, believe it or not. As corny as that may sound, but like they really go out of the way to help their customers, and oftentimes they struggle a lot with recognizing their own internal value. And I don't want to blanket say this. I'm saying the ones that I've ran into that have had the courage to self-diagnose. I need to get better at what I do, and have been vulnerable enough with me to say these are the things that I need to work on. Many of them use a lot of negative self-talk, and so because of that, it's that can come off in a sales conversation with a customer. Now, where they are very confident is in their numbers, right? In their technical knowledge about
Sure.
tax law or bookkeeping, technical skills, because that's where they're what they're proud of, right? They joined this industry because like they really like it. They like their time on their own to take care of things. They love solving problems. They like finding, they're detail oriented. They're, there's actually an assessment, a personality assessment. There's plenty of out there, but there's one in particular that I took. If you go to positiveintelligence.com, they talk about your saboteurs. These are kind of like, there's like 10 little voices in your head that kind of prevent you from greatness. And like one of them is called the judge. And there's a few others. There's like
Yeah.
a people pleaser, and there's a bunch other, but a lot of accountants are sticklers. And the stickler is the person inside your head that questions everything, that kind of like tries to contradict, or is the analytical, or like tries to make sure that everything crosses the T and dots the I, like,
Yeah.
because they are all about following the rules, because everything's a regulation in the IRS, etc.
Sure.
So yes, they can come across with some powerless language, some tentative, especially when it comes around pricing, pricing their services and selling. But when it comes to what's binary, what's black or white, which is what's a debit, what's a credit, and what's a tax law, it's like the switch flips, right? Because it's what they know they can prove on paper. But anything
Yeah.
that's not, cannot be proven on paper, it's like creative, or it's out in the air, they do freeze a little bit, or they struggle to level up that skill set.
Well, and one thing you brought up, and I wanted to tie this back into the salespeople, is when you're working with, say, your customer, your prospect is somebody that maybe fits that stickler adjective, and figuring out how do you come across to them in a way to connect is knowing that they are very detail oriented. And again, I'm stereotyping, but sometimes salespeople like to wing it. They shoot from the hip. They're not always the most detailed. So depending on who you are giving a presentation to or putting a presentation in front of, you're less likely to win if you don't have all the information for the person that you're presenting to, if that's what they need to take it across the finish line. So I wanted to see if that makes sense for how you can take powerless language, improve upon it, but also think about the people you're talking to and what they want to see from how you're speaking to them.
Yeah, I think a few takeaways from the conversation of Powers Language. One is record your sales conversations. Either trust a mentor or someone who's really solid with interpersonal skills that can give you some feedback on like, hey, here, like some great things that you're doing, and one or two things you could avoid from saying. It could this, and find the things that are distracting. Like distracting could be like, I saw the other day a video of someone interviewing my brother, and the person I was interviewing was touching his face a lot. And I said, and this guy is just, it's so distracting. The conversation is great,
Yeah.
but like it just drives me crazy. This guy's just touching his beard and going like that the whole time. And I was like, hey, can you give him that feedback? But like
Yeah.
the coach in me is constantly, and I'm hyper focused. But if you're going to, if I notice that, I wonder how many others do. So like, I will say do that. The second thing is there's a really good book, and I know you might ask me this later, but like there's a really good book written by Chris Voss, the FBI negotiator. Not sure if you're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
Highly recommend it to you and your listeners. But it talks about three personality types when you're, whether they're on the sales person side or on the customer side. And you have someone who is assertive, sort of like the dominant, like, the I want to try to get a deal, I'm going to bargain hard type of personality. You've got someone who's analytical, who is more of that stickler, who wants to kind of see the numbers and they want to like break down every detail. And then there's the third one who is amicable, or sort of like the nice person that's like just easygoing, but they lack commitment. Everything's very tentative. They're like,
They'll
oh
always
my God,
take your
everything
phone
sounds
call.
great.
They'll see you, but they won't actually go through with anything.
Yeah, yeah. And so
Yeah,
like identifying those personalities and, mirroring and matching that could help tremendously.
that's great. I wanted to talk about another topic, which is reframing in sales conversations. So I wanted to see if you had any great examples, I guess, first and foremost, what reframing means to you, as well as, any specific stories where you've used reframing or maybe coached somebody and where they figured out how they could use reframing to be more successful.
Yeah. There's this catchy sentence that I used to share with my sales team that I used to coach, which is like, if you're getting a lot of objections, you're not asking enough questions. Kind of a little bit of a Dr. Seuss style rhyme
Yeah.
there. And if you're not asking enough questions, you're going to deal with objections. And sometimes asking questions and also framing a what if situation can really help the person that you're interacting with see things from a different point of view. So I'll give you the example of when I used to be a business banker. One of the products that I used to sell were business lines of credit for small businesses. I think small business owners that are listening here would really connect with this, why they need it. And when I get in front of a lot of business owners, especially successful ones, because banks only lend to businesses that are doing well, but businesses that are doing well don't need credit, which is kind of an interesting
Mm-hmm.
contradiction. The business owners that struggle are the ones that need credit, but when they apply for credit, they get declined because their cash flow sucks, etc. So I can only lend to businesses that are doing well. So how do I frame for a business that doesn't need capital how to get access to a credit line? So I remember one situation where I had a veterinarian and I was prospecting. I was calling actual leads. He was a non-customer, and this came from a list of real estate properties, commercial real estate properties that had an existing lien from another bank. And we were offering this commercial refinance loan for owner occupied business real estate. And I was like, hey, we've got this awesome promotion, no origination fee, this, that, and the other. We'd love to just drop by your place, tell you about it, potentially save you hundreds of dollars per year on your mortgage payment, and talk more details, what have you. And he's like, yeah, swing by. I go to the place, I meet with him, and turns out he actually was a personal customer, but his business accounts weren't with us. And he's like, no, yes, this, that, the other. I asked him questions. Also turned out that he had a house free and clear. He had a home free and clear that was, I don't know, $500,000, let's say. And we had a product that was a business credit line, and you could use your house as collateral. And I said, hey, what might be more appetizing for you, just a thought for you, is to get a business line of credit on your home. Like, you never know if you need the money. And he's like, but I don't need the money. I was like, I don't need the money. I was like, I'm looking at your practice, and what if, and I just kind of like ask him a question, talk about reframing. I go, well, what happens if you have like this huge investment opportunity? Let's just kind of play the curiosity game, let's say. And the only requirement is you need to have 250,000 cash today to have maybe a $2 million potential gain or something like that. I literally just kind of, I don't know where I came up with this.
Yeah.
Like I kind of threw it in the air because I was trying to sell it, right?
Sure.
But
Yeah.
but I didn't have any proof of this really coming true to life. And he's like, interesting. Okay. All right, let's do it. So I end up selling it, right? And then 2 months later, customer calls me up and he's like, hey, Carlos, I want you to swing by my vet. I got something for you. I'm like, oh, cool. Awesome. Happy to. I come by, he gives me like this huge like thank you basket. And he's like, I want to give you this. I go like, oh my God, what for? Like, where you gave me your business. I should be giving you. He's
Yeah.
like, no, I want to tell you that exactly a month ago, I was just presented with an opportunity to be a wholesale vendor, supplier for Petco. And I happened to have, when I bought this practice, some weird grandfather license that allowed me to be a wholesaler as a vet, which is not something everybody can have, just because of the city where I was occupied. And it just so happened to be that this was like a, what do you call it, serendipitous moment. And
Sure.
because of it, I landed it like a multi-million-dollar contract. And had I not, and that one of the requirements for me to qualify, I needed to have 200,000 of capital available. And the line of credit you gave me is
Allowed me
the
to do it.
thing that made the difference. And I was just like, whoa, I get it now. So reframing is a lot about what if. It's about future state. It's helping someone look at, well, what if there's like a negative effect of you not taking action? What if there's a positive effect if you do take action? So a lot of the what if questions can help you reframe
Yeah.
things so that you can allow the customer or the prospect you're talking to see things from a different perspective. And the best way for you to validate that that was an effective way in framing it is if they respond with these words. I never thought about it that way. That's when you've earned a little bit of trust, or at least credibility on their point, even if they say no to you. But just them saying I never thought about it the way, they already see you as an expert.
Well, what I love about your story is a lot of times sales professionals get hung up on what they already know. They get very familiar with the process they're in. And like you said, you have a customer that, why would they need the money? You start asking the why question. Why would they need the money? Now you have almost this unlimited amount of prospect list that's just opened up to you because you have the story behind why it makes sense for somebody to consider doing exactly what you pitched to somebody else. So now this somewhat outlandish possibility that happened now becomes a feather in your cap that not many people can speak to. And now you're going out and going, hey, I know this might sound crazy, but I have somebody that did it. Instead of just being like, what if? Now you can go to this can happen. And here's a great example of it. So be willing to take some shots, some flyers, and then when they land, you have something that nobody else does.
Yeah, there's an old school skill that I picked up. I forgot from where it's called. Feel, felt, found. Now I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
Feel, felt, found. Have you heard about it?
I have not.
Where someone gives you an objection and what you respond with is, it sounds like the way you feel is X, Y, or Z, or I know how you feel. I've had other people feel that way. What we have found is, they
Got
have
it.
done this and that. And this is what happens. Just kind of using like a third party story as a way to strengthen the way you reframe it. Now, I know how you feel can be dangerous territory, so I like to kind of change that to, it sounds like this is important to you, right? So
Yeah.
you're getting them to say yes to you because you don't know how somebody else feels if you haven't felt it yourself. And sometimes that could feel a little not genuine, like not
Sure.
authentic. Yeah. So
Well, taking from feel to go to feelings, you have another tagline which I want to ask about, which is handling emotional hijackers. So again, what is this, Carlos? What is this tagline, and can you give us some examples to help us relate to it?
Jeff, have you ever had someone jump on a call and they say, "Who the hell is this? What do you want?" Or "I'm not interested." All right, so what's going to be your best price? Or, "Hey, I already saw your competition and there's no way you're going to beat them."
I wish I could say no to every single one of those, but unfortunately I can't. So yes, I have.
Right. And so what happens initially when someone comes up to you and that's like the first thing of how they kick off a call? What happens to you? What's going through your mind and through your heart and through your body when you first get one of those? Like, what's the initial reaction?
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to some of those conversations, I get a little tense. I might get a little defensive, and the other thing I probably do is I start speaking more than listening.
And you get thrown off. It just
Yeah,
throws you off your game. And that's what an emotional hijacker is someone who kind of comes in and just tries to like grab you and take control of the situation. And sometimes they say certain things that just trigger some of these reactions. And so, again, we know these things exist, but we never put a label to it. So now that you know that it exists, it's like, all right, so how do I handle it? So the first thing is just kind of like, one of the things I say is just like take a breath and just kind of put a label on it. Like, all right, this person's trying to hijack this emotionally. I'm not going to allow it to do it. So put a label on it, and then just take a breath, even pause and say, okay, so it sounds like what's your price or what's the low price? Okay, so it sounds like for you, price is the only thing that's going to make or break this conversation, correct? And so you kind of flip it on them, right?
yeah,
Like there's nothing else. So if we were to take price outside of this variable, are there any other things that are important to you? Because I just want to make sure I address what's most important to you, because we haven't even gotten to the conversation of what you really need.
Yeah.
And so you kind of just flipping it, and you're sort of resetting the tone, and you're kind of like restating, like they're saying these are going to be the rules of this conversation. You're saying, oh, hang on, let's negotiate what the rules of the conversation are. Like, why are we here? Why are we really here? So I just kind of pause and say, I want to address that. It sounds like that's an important thing to you, and we are going to talk about it. But before I can give you a firm commitment on giving you an answer on that, to be honest with you, I just need to get to know your situation a little bit better. So, would you be okay? Would you be open if we kind of put that on the parking lot and I ask you just some questions so that I can accurately give you an answer? Because I think it would be irresponsible of me if I give you an answer based on that direct question without, and I think it would just be unfair to you too, without me knowing anything about you or your business or your goals. Is that fair? And you just kind of flip it, and you just like let them, because some people just
Decompress.
sometimes kind of wear their emotions on their sleeve.
Yeah.
And 80-90% of the time, if you do that, they're going to actually apologize. I'm so sorry, man. I just went through 5 other phone calls with 5 asshole salespeople that are just like trying to like drag this, that, and the other. It's I like your vibe. Let's go. Let's rock and roll. You know, like all of a sudden you've won them over.
Yeah.
So sometimes they are also testing you, right? They're testing to see if, are you someone who's going to be soft? Are you going to be politically correct? You know, sometimes people just want to deal with people,
Yeah.
and don't try to say what you think they want to hear. Try to say what, like, try to just be real. Like, hey, chill out, man.
Oh, I was gonna say one thing that I found out about myself, and it's not for everybody, and it's not necessarily for every prospect or customer, is I think humor sets me apart from other people. And an example that I can relate to when you say that is I remember I was the last person in on a deal. The guy was telling me, hey, we got 5 competitive bids. I had to get yours only because we require 5. I ever got everybody else's number in hand. If you even want to have a shot at this, you need to be here today. You know, he's setting the rules of the game, like you mentioned, and he's putting me up against these hypothetical situations that I had no chance against. I said, I will come in today, but I can't promise you I'm going to give you a number. I just can't. And so I go in there. He is so cold, so hard. And I knew I was going to win. I had no chance. And one of the things I told him, I said, listen, I'm going to get you a proposal. You got to make me a promise. You can't light it on fire and throw it in your trash can. Because if you light it in fire and throw it in your trash can, it's going to be the 3rd time it's happened this week, and I'm going to quit. I'm not going to work anymore. And he is like, what are you talking about? And that was the first time where his like hard shell language of body started to melt down a little bit. And he's like, are you serious? And I was like, no, I'm not serious. I said, but you didn't give me a chance at all during this conversation. This is the first time I feel like we're actually having a conversation now. So now I want to know, like, yes, I want to earn your business. Yes, I want, but he was trying to be that emotional hijacker. He was doing it because he had all these people putting pressure on him to hit these objectives. That's not who he was. And I will tell you, at the end of the day, I ended up winning the project. I was able to get everybody else out down to 1. And I won't go into that detail, but I can so relate to that emotional hijacker tagline.
Congrats, man. Yeah, no, and you also disrupted, because he was trying to disrupt your thing, and you kind of disrupted his, right? By doing something unorthodox that made him kind of go, huh?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he was out of sorts, and then it just kind of allowed you to have some space to be able to, give you the actual ability to make your pitch and your presentation. So.
If you deal with people that don't have necessarily this confidence of maybe recognizing the emotional hijacker, or have gone through enough of them to just be able to take that breath, is there anything specific you would do? Let's say you get I'm going to give you an example because I'm putting you on the spot. You get a very nasty voicemail where the guy says, I'm calling you because I need something. You're never available. I need you to give me a call back in 30 minutes or less. And that's the message. So you're having to deal with that person that's ready to deal with your emotions and hijack them. How do you handle that?
Yeah, and some of this is setting boundaries. If I'm going to be working with someone that's going to speak to me in such a way that is disrespectful and to their standards, I'm not doing what is satisfactory to them, I would just kind of level set some expectations. And I say, first of all, if I could call them within that 30 minutes, I'll try to honor that, if I don't have any other conflicts. But if to their standards, I'm someone who doesn't respond to their calls and I have to call them every time they need me, they're going to have to pay. I would just set some boundaries and say, Mr. Customer, first of all, like, what's the problem? Like
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, what happened? Tell me, I'm confused. I would start with I'm confused.
Okay.
Right? I love being confused. But one of my favorite things to do is being confused.
Yeah.
Because being confused is a diffuser. Help me understand. I'm confused. You're telling me that if I don't call you in 30 minutes, we're no longer going to do business. And you're telling me that I never respond to your calls. Well, looking at my blog, what's never to you? Like, where in our relationship did we ever agree that I had to get back to you like within an hour every time you send me an email? And what are your realistic expectations? Because I want to level set some realities. If you expect for me to be someone who's available to you exactly at the moment all the time, then I think you need me to be a full-time employee for you. But based on our relationship, I'm a vendor, I'm a contractor. And if I remember correctly, these were the terms, that this was what's going to happen. So I think if ever someone was to do that, then I did a really poor job at setting expectations in our relationship up front. So if someone is confronted with that now, then I think the work that they would have to do is level set really strong expectations up front. Here's how our relationship is going to work. Here's what it includes. Here's what it doesn't include. If ever this happens, or asking really good questions around what is the definition of a successful relationship to you? What does responding fast mean to you? So gaining clarity around what is the customer's interpretation of what, good service, or, these things that like avoid the emotional hijacking. But
Yeah.
if fortunately for me, I've had the luxury to pick the customers that I want. And whenever I see those red flags early on, I actually try to not take on those type of clients. Like I had someone who was trying to sort of take advantage of all these free discovery calls with me and pick my brain as much as possible. And as like 2 times we met, and he was like, well, I want to do this and I want to do that, and send me a quote. And then he asked me for another quote. And then he was like, hey, can we meet again? We weren't ready 3 months ago. I go, actually, my business model has changed. And if you want to meet for 15 minutes, I charge $50. Let me know. He went away.
Yeah.
Right. So rather than me freaking going around the bend trying to like bend over backwards for them, they're super high maintenance. They haven't paid me a minute or a dollar, and they're like taking all my time. I just set a boundary. And then when they went back through my quote, there's like, hey, we're ready to do it. Actually, my business model has changed. This quote expired. I now charge, and I like threw another 30%.
Yeah.
Because I knew they were going to be a high maintenance person. And so never heard from them again. And I didn't want their business because that's just not my, like, I want to work with people that are like me, honest, realistic, not anxious, not thinking that everything is the end of the world, because then it kills my vibe. It my emotional situation.
I can relate to that. And I would say, from one of the things I tell sales guys all the time is, and I love the just terminology, emotional hijacker, but you're going to have customers or prospects or whoever want to set those boundaries for you. Like, here's my boundaries. Basically, if you want to do business with me, here they are. And I think you're right, especially when you're going after accounts so you don't have a relationship already established. The worst thing you can do is earn their business based off of them believing you're able to hit each one of their expectations, while it's not realistic. And we can all say in all aspects of the world, it's great to be like, look at this customer that I won, or look at this sale that I had. But if it's not a repeat customer, frankly, it's a loser. And for a lot of companies, they will admit it. But for sales guys, it's hard because they want to get that win no matter what. It's like you hear like Apollo Creed before he loses in Rocky, like, don't throw the towel in no matter what. And I just think back to, yes, when you're establishing a relationship with someone, it's very important to know what your boundaries are, what their boundaries are, and be honest. If they say, hey, if I call you at any time of the night, are you going to be available? Some people are unwilling to say no. And
Right.
if you're going to say yes, then when that person calls you at 3 o'clock and 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and if you're the person that wants to answer the phone, that's great. But if you're not, then don't say yes, say no.
Yep.
And it's important to make sure you establish that. So I'm glad you brought that up. It makes a lot of clarity for it. Now I know. Now it's funny because anytime somebody tries to hijack my emotions, I'm going to smile every time because I'm going to think of our conversation and be like, they're freaking trying to hijack my emotions, Carlos. I'm not going to let them.
Right on. Right on, man. Awesome.
So you mentioned already a favorite book, so I'm not going to ask you that. But in the business world, is there anybody you look up to?
Yeah, there's a lot of folks. I've been digging into this guy actually. I have this book right here, Phil M. Jones. I'm actually going to be taking his certification. It's called Exactly What to Say. It's like one of my favorite. It's a simple dude. He's just kind of for any types of conversations, sales conversations. He's got like a sequence of words of like exactly, literally exactly what to say in a sales conversations, and the objective is to open up rejection free conversations. So like opening open-ended questions, and like, you know, one of the phrases that I like is called like this one, for example. It's like, I'm not sure if this is for you, but, you know,
Yeah,
well, you know, just kind of starting a conversation like, hey, I'm not sure if this is for you, but I've got this thing, you know, this product or whatever. Well, let me be the judge of that, is kind of what the customer thinks, right? So it puts the customer in a situation where they're like, well, they want to say yes. So
sure.
what's really cool, it's like it gives you a sequence of words you can use to navigate conversations, and in an ethical fashion. So I'm really a big fan of his. Jeb Blount is a really good author for a lot of sales books, whether it's for B2B individuals. I've got a bunch of his. One's called Fanatical Prospecting, for those who are looking to like do lead generation and just like cold calling, DMing, things like that.
Yeah.
I really like that book. Chris Do is a business thought leader, and but he's more in the creative space. Um, there's a bunch, man, but
Yeah.
like some of them are sort of like these like very niche down type of leaders, but those are a few.
Well, that's awesome. And you know, just based off our conversation, I can tell you're somebody that has confidence. And I think confidence is key in sales because people want to deal with people that they know are going to, you know, be able to help them. And if you could give some advice to people that are struggling in sales, what would you say?
Um, be eternally curious. You know, just never stop asking questions. Like I think that's what helped me a lot to be successful. Like I just ask, but why? But why? It's kind of like with the 5-year-old kid. If you have kids, you know, right?
Oh my
But why?
gosh.
But why? But why?
Yeah.
Just never stop being curious about why your goals are the way they are, why customers object the way they do, why is this industry better, why is this product better, why is this approach better, why. So just be eternally curious. Um, Observe and learn from the best. Find someone in your the top ranking people, maybe that number one. I would probably say like anywhere between from like number 5 and number 10, because chances are number 1, 2, and 3 could be doing things that are unethical. I'm not saying all number 1 people are
Interesting.
unethical, but I would look for like 3 to 10 if you're competing, and just kind of ask them if you can shadow them for a day. Like that was helpful for me. Like I grabbed so many best practices from the top people, and I was just like, this is gold. And
Yeah.
why this? Why do you do it this way? Why do you say that way? Um, get a coach or a mentor to give you feedback on like the way you're doing sales, and watch a successful person do a sales conversation in a way that you would see yourself doing it. Like don't do it in a way you don't see yourself doing it. If they're sneaky or weird, unethical, and like and it just doesn't vibe with you, I wouldn't do that. Do it with someone that, you know, you think like would do it the way that you could see yourself do it.
I love the word curious you brought up. You mentioned it earlier, and I wanted to hit on that. I'm glad you re-brought it up so I could mention something about that. But I feel like curiosity behind the walls too. Like when you're prospecting or you're calling it people, be curious about what they do. Be curious about the
Yeah.
people that make decisions. Be curious about who they use for their business. If you can use curiosity when you prospect to learn more about them and find ways to uncover items that are available to you. The other thing I would say about the word curious is you have to be willing to ask uncomfortable questions to get the information that people are usually uncomfortable or unwilling to provide. So if you're not willing to ask that why, like you said, and keep going, you're not going to get the information you really need to get to the pain or get to the reason why you can provide value. So you have to be willing to go there and you have to keep going deep in those conversations. So I love the word curious. I'm going to keep that in my mind here now as I continue my venture because it's a great word to focus on.
Yeah. The last thing I'll share about curiosity is that the nice thing about being curious is that it helps kind of kill or eliminate the judge. And the judge inside of us, and the one that judges the situation, or the one that judges the customer or their fellow team member, is the thing that kills everything, right? Because the moment you judge yourself, oh, I was bad at that call, or I'm not good in sales, or nobody likes me, I just got rejected 100 times, whatever. Or you judge the client, oh, that person's rude and this and that. Or we judge our team member or our manager. Like when the judge comes out, the curious person, it dies, right? And so, I would say, like, choose curiosity over judgment when you're going into, the work that you do. And what it'll do is it'll create a more positive outcome, because when you go in with judgment, you're judging a situation, a deal, before you even get into the appointment, the customer before you even meet them, maybe because you saw their name, or you see the street that the business operates out of, or the city, or whatever. And like, when the judge comes out, like, just be ready for that to not have a good outcome. But when the curiosity cat comes out, you'll start seeing that more positive outcomes will happen.
For sure. That's awesome. And for you, you're pretty active on social media, and I wanted to make sure people knew where to find you after our conversation here. So what's the best way to see what you're doing and what information you're putting out there?
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm really active on Instagram at Exceed Sales. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My website is www.exceedSalesTraining.com. Yeah, send me a message if there's anything I could help you with, and happy to help.
Man, it's awesome. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Just you mentioned the word vibe too. Like, your vibe is just it breeds confidence, but it's also just that, like, comfort vibe where it's like, man, I want to talk
Thanks,
to
man.
you because you just got that confidence, that belief, that encouraging vibe. And more people like you are needed in the world. So thank you for providing that
Thank
energy.
you.
Just that the information that you were able to share with me, and I know the listeners today, is something that people are going to take with them and succeed more on. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, and wonderful interview. Thank you for having me on, and until next time, I guess.
Absolutely. I may have to run this back on your show. How about it? So yeah, Jeff Hillen, Carlos Garcia here on Selling Stories. Everybody, make it a great day. Thank you.